Hello my treasures, it's time for more cards in Showdown in Badlands to be revealed and reviewed by me. This is going to be the third batch, and we are going to be trying something a little bit different with this video. With the most recently revealed cards at the beginning and the cards that are the oldest that I haven't covered yet towards the end, just so we can give you a better viewing experience on things you might have already seen from other Hearthstone creators. So let's begin with the Shaman cards. The first one is going to be Skarr, the Catastrophe, a 7 cost, 7 attack, 7 HP elemental that has Battle Cry. Deal 1 damage to all enemies, improved by each turn in a row you've played an elemental. Oh, it is worth mentioning, according to this article, if you skip a turn, the turn counter will reset, which means this card is probably less useful than I originally expected, but if you can consistently refill your hand with elementals, you should be able to get some type of big payoff by still using that card, while also acting as a board clear and a way to do face damage to your opponent. All right, now for the next card, which is going to be Minecart Cruiser, a 3 cost, 4 attack, 5 HP elemental, rush, overload 2, battle cry. If you played an elemental last turn, don't overload. So this is actually a pretty well statted minion. If we're playing Elemental Shaman, which is still missing a low-cost elemental, this card is actually pretty good on a turn 3, because most likely you're going to be able to slam down some type of elemental on the previous turn. You could also use things like Mistake and Amalgam of the Deep as pseudo-elementals in order to buff those up by using things like the Stone Right. And between this card and the previous card, this deck is actually shaping up to be quite powerful. We also do have that neutral card that does AoE damage whenever it does die to all non-friendly elementals, which could be really powerful for this deck too, especially on curve. You could, in theory, buff this up with a Bloodlust or any other buff. You also have the added benefit of being able to discount it through things like Inza, that discounts any overloaded card. However, I will say this is probably going to be a walking meme, pun intended, but it should be a lot of fun to play around with. All right, for the next Shaman card, it's going to be Cactus Cutter, a 2 cost, 2 attack, 2 HP Murloc with Battlecry. Draw a spell. If you cast it this turn, gain +1, +2, and taunt. Now, nice thing about this card is, in theory, you could run it in a Magatha Murloc aggro deck where you're probably only going to run the 2 Bloodlust cards. You're not going to really worry about getting the buff on this minion itself, but being able to draw into the key spells that you really need once you swarm the board should be really powerful. So honestly, this is a card that I can see seeing a lot of play, especially because it plays into the next card, which is going to be Trusty Companion, a 2 cost spell that gives a minion +2, +3. If it has a minion type, draw one of that type. This is great for Menegarie decks. It also is really good for only one tribal synergy decks, such as a Elemental Shaman deck that we've been seeing a lot of in this set, making this card probably incredibly powerful for any type of deck that uses at least 1 or 2 different tribal synergies. Totem Shaman would also be a really good target for this card, just because you always will have your hero power available, so you can draw into your big totem synergies. And even Elemental Shaman with the new legendary that we saw earlier in this video, where you're going to want to have a steady stream of elementals in order to keep that minion's battle cry as big as humanly possible. Now let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Giant Tumbleweed, a 7 cost nature spell that deals 6 damage to all minions. Summon a 6/6 Tumbleweed. This Tumbleweed does not have an elemental tag, which makes it a little bit worse. This also does dilute the pool for your lightning reflexes, making that card a little bit worse. I am curious if we'll see some unnerfs to Nature Shaman, just because of the fact that we are getting a few nature spells within the set, making the deck's consistency a lot worse than it was in Titans. I would have much preferred maybe costing 5 and then overloading 2, than costing 7 and only doing 6 damage. I think there are just a lot better options for Shaman to use than a card like this. Now for the next card, which is going to be Amphibious Elixir, a 2 cost nature spell, restore 5 health, discover a spell. Again, this is going to dilute the pool of nature spells a little bit for lightning reflexes, making that deck a little bit worse than it currently is. However, compared to the previous card, this does give you, in theory, additional nature spells that you can easily use in combination with a bunch of the other nature synergy. It also provides some much needed survivability to Shaman, since we've never really seen a Resto Shaman deck come out, and we probably will never, because Blizzard tends to move away from healing for some real reason, even though there are a lot of classes in this game that have a healing archetype in them. Overall, I think this card probably will see some play, just because it is a random discoverability effect for 2 mana and also allows you to survive a little bit longer by restoring 5 HP. Now for the final Shaman card, Holli'dae, a 5 cost 4 attack, 5 HP. That has the Highlander effect if your deck has no duplicates. Equipped the Staff of 9 Frogs. The frogs are back with a vengeance. The Staff of 9 Frogs is, after your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 frog with taunt. Each frog is bigger than the last. Overall, this card looks really fun to play and is a Highlander card that isn't too game warping, but does have a pretty decent effect on it to make you actually want to run it, especially because it is only going to be 5 mana. This should allow you to protect your face with a bunch of weak little taunt minions early on, but as you attack and over the turns, it'll get bigger and bigger. The only downside about this card is you're going to have to wait until way later into the game to get the biggest frogs. Honestly speaking, by renaming this card to like Staff of 7 Frogs or even lower, and then making it where it increases by 2 instead of 1, then this card would be a lot more playable. But as it currently stands, I still think this should see some type of play. Probably going to be a walking meme, pun intended, but it should be a lot of fun to play around with. I've been having a lot of nostalgia for these Mega Wind Fury cards ever since the newest Twist format has come out, since I've been trying to make Mimiron's head work, and this is probably a better version of that. Alright, now for the next card. Now for the DK cards, the first one is going to be one of their legendaries, Reska, the Pit Boss, a 20 cost minion that requires 1 Frost Rune, 1 Unholy Rune, that has 6 attack, 3 HP, has the Undead tag, Rush, costs 1 less for each minion that has died this game. Death Rattle, take control of a random enemy minion. Oh, most people I've seen talking about this card so far have missed the point that this actually scales off of both friendly and enemy minions dying. And because Unholy tends to be the rune that spams out a bunch of minions, and so does Frost from time to time, this card actually will be able to be discounted really quickly. I honestly can't see a world where this doesn't see play. It's interesting to see a non-pure DK list supported again, but this could easily end up similar to Plagues, where eventually they just remove the dual requirement on any of the cards. Now for the next card, which is going to be part of the Excavating package, which is Skeleton Crew, a 4 cost 3 attack 3 HP undead minion that requires 1 Frost Rune, Battlecry, Excavate, a treasure, it costs 0. Also worth mentioning, this card was revealed in the initial batch of cards, but was something that I completely missed on. It looks like the classes that are going to be centered around excavating are going to have a legendary treasure that they'll get at the end of their cycle. And since we are talking about excavating cards right now, this should always in theory get you the previous card that we just went over if you wanted to go down that route, which might be one reason why you wouldn't want to use them in a Excavating Death Knight list. However, you could also use this as a way to reborn the Primus in order to have reborn on it, and then allow yourself to heal up for quite a bit of damage every time you do use the Flood ability. Just a really flexible card, and probably a good reason to run the Excavating package in Death Knight. This is also a really good card because it does allow you to just discount whatever treasure you excavate to 0, thus allowing you to have some combo enablers. It doesn't require 2 different types of runes, which makes it even better. I love the flavor behind this card too, because it's a skeleton cobalt with a little candle that is put out on top of its head, mining for some treasure. Honestly, excavating in Death Knight is a mechanic is so thematic with the class that I am very much shocked I didn't realize how cool this synergy or idea would be until we saw these cards. Now let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Crop Rotation, a 3 cost 1 Unholy Rune spell. Summon 4 1/1 undeads with Rush that die at the end of your turn. Essentially, this is a 3 mana for 4 uses of your hero power, except it can't hit your opponent's face. But this does feed into the first legendary that we did go over, and does feed into some other cards that Death Knight does have access to, such as Menegarie. Overall, I think this card is probably quite powerful, and it will act as a board clear if you need to get rid of your opponent's board. Now for the next card, which is going to be Pile of Bones, a 2-cost 2 attack 1 HP. Undead minion with the death rattle. The next time you excavate, resummon this with 1 frost rune and 1 unholy rune as its requirements. This card is actually pretty good. It could in theory be an endless minion depending on how many excavating cards you're going to run in the deck. And because we've seen quite a few really good excavating cards for DK, I can't see a world where this excavating package in Death Knight doesn't see some type of play. And now for the the artwork that originally leaked out before the set got revealed. Ma and Pa, a 4-cost 1 attack 8 HP undead minion that requires 1 blood rune and 1 unholy rune. At the end of your turn, gain 5 corpses. At the start of your turn, spend 5 corpses to give your hero plus 5 HP. In theory, this means you can go infinite with your HP in Death Knight once again. They removed vampiric blood from the discover pool for a good reason, and it looks like we may or may not be making that mistake once again. And honestly, out of all the cards revealed for this set, this is actually the only card that works for blood DK in any way. This would be a card that I'd be completely fine with them removing the 1 unholy rune just to give blood DK a little extra boost, since it hasn't gotten any support in a long time at this point. Now let's go on to the next card, which is Corpse Farm, a 3-cost 1 unholy rune spell that spend up to 8 corpses to summon a random minion of that cost. Now, I don't really know what the pool for this card is going to be at different points. I will say this card is actually a really good spender for Rainbow DK with the Chromatic Necrotic Explosion. We've been missing a 1 rune corpse spender for quite a long time for that deck, which means this card will probably fit in there really easily and probably be incredibly strong. It doesn't really matter what minion you're generating off of it, as long as it's not something with a big downside. Overall, because of the fact that Rainbow DK does exist, this card will probably see a lot of play. Now for the next card, which is going to be Farm Hand, a 3-cost 2 unholy rune card with 4 attack, 3 HP, undead, Battle Cry. Discover an undead, Quickdraw. It costs 2 less. Now, the undead pool for Death Knight is actually pretty good. There are some really bad targets that you, in theory, could get. However, because of the fact that it will be a little bit of mana cheat, this is probably a card that will see some play in a Unholy DK list, just because it is a pretty decent, well-statted minion for 3 mana. Now for the next card, which is Fistful of Corpses, a 1-cost, 1 blood rune, 1 unholy rune spell that deals damage to a minion equal to your corpses. Oh, this is the perfect removal tool for Rainbow DK, and I really wish it didn't have the 1 unholy rune cost for blood DK, because that would be so nice, but it is what it is. It's cool that they're trying to support Rainbow DK. It's a deck that I love so much. Out of all the DK lists, it's probably my favorite one, just because you can get so unique with it. And historically speaking, you've always been missing a corpse spending tool, which we are seeing in the set in Corpse Farm, because that only costs 1 unholy rune to run it. And then this is a perfect removal tool for the deck, which wasn't really missing a lot of early game removal tools. However, this can also act as a late game removal tool, just depending on how quickly you can spend all of your corpses. Overall, this is a card that I can't see a world where this doesn't see play. I also really want to point out Reska. Can we please get a portrait of him for DK? He looks so cool. But enough with that. Let's get onto the priest cards. We're going to start off with the 1-cost package. The first one we're going to go over is Holy Springwater, a 2-cost spell that has the Holy tag, restore 8 health to a damaged character, save any excess in a 1-cost bottle. This will allow you to save these for later, and we'll be seeing a legendary that will allow you to copy these later. I will say this card would have been perfect in the Holy OTK deck that I tried out and posted on this channel a week or 2 ago. One thing worth mentioning, this is a little bit anti-synergistic with Overheal, just because you're never going to get Overheal with this card. which means it's probably not going to be used that much outside of real big meme decks or decks that really want to use a bunch of 1-cost cards. The next card we're going to go over is Invasive Shade Leaf, a 4-cost shadow spell that deals 8 damage to an enemy minion. Save any excess in a 1-cost bottle. This is probably a better card than the previous one that we just went over, just because it acts as 2 removal tools instead of 1. Sure, it does cost 4, and there are some better 4-cost removal tools if you do need only 1 removal instead of 2, such as Cannibalize. But because there are going to be ways to copy the 1-cost spell within your hand, it can act as more than just only 2 removal tools in the long run. Generally, this is probably a pretty decent card. It'll probably see some type of play if 1-cost Priest becomes a very functional deck. Now for the next one, which is going to be Swarm of Light Bugs, a 5-cost spell. Summon 10 1/1 light bugs with lifesteal. Save any excess in a 1-cost bottle. Now there are a few problems with this card in particular. Priest doesn't really currently in Standard have a way to AoE buff a lot of minions up. However, this also does have another problem with the card. The Astral Automatons from Titans are just a way better 1-cost minion to want to copy off of some of the other 1-cost support cards that we are seeing in the set for Priest. Overall, this floods the Rise Dead pool with a bunch of 1/1s that have lifesteal, which aren't always the best. Out of all the 1-cost generating spells, this is probably the worst out of the entire bunch. I don't really see any home for this card in particular. Now for the next card, which is going to be Thirsty Drifter, a 6-cost 4 attack, 6 HP. Minion with taunt costs 1 less for each 1-cost card you've played this game. This is a really good minion. This is great for Automaton Priest. I know it will dilute the pool with Raise Undead a little bit once you do reduce it past the breaking point of 3 mana, but if you play it early enough, you should be able to swarm your board with a bunch of these minions, and because their stat line is so hard to actually deal with unless it just destroys everything on the board, this is going to probably be pretty decent in the long run. Even if some of the other 1-cost cards within the set are really bad, Priest has access to a lot of really good 1-cost cards that weren't printed in this set. Now for the grand finale of the 1-cost Priest cards, Pip the Potent, a 4-cost minion with 3 attack, 5 HP, battlecry, copy each 1-cost card in your hand. Astral Automaton is exactly the cards that you're probably going to want to copy off of this, or even Raise Dead. It's worth mentioning that while I do think a lot of the other cards within this package are really weak, Priest already has access to a lot of really powerful 1-cost cards, which will be able to be easily abused by this card and the Thirsty card that we went over earlier. Because honestly, Automaton Priest was missing 1 or 2 really good cards, and I think that deck got 2 really good cards within this set. Now let's get onto the next card, which is going to be Pose Possession, a 4-cost shadow spell. Summon a 4/4 copy of a random minion in your opponent's hand. With Titans and Colossus minions floating around, this card actually in theory has some potential. However, because it is a random minion from your opponent's hand, it is probably a card that is a little bit too well balanced. Now if this card costs 3 instead of 4, I think it would maybe see some play. The one upside about this card in particular is the fact that you can run it in the same deck as Elise, and then you're not going to have to rely on running a bunch of minions yourself. But there are just better tools to give you minions from your opponent's deck or hand that currently exist in Priest that you would want to run over something like this, even in a Highlander deck. Now let's get onto the next card, which is going to be Benevolent Banker, a 3-cost 2 attack, 4 HP minion. Battlecry, discover a spell from your deck. Quickdraw, enemy deck instead. You can steal cards straight out of your opponent's deck. This card is going to be really annoying to play against. It's a card that will probably see a lot of play just because it isn't copying a card from your opponent's deck. It is just straight up giving you that card. And if you can get the quick draw effect on it most turns, it's pretty good. But even if you can't, it's targeted draw power, which is always good in Priest. There are certain key spells within your deck that you would rather have instead of something from your opponent's deck. You could steal a key spell from your opponent that they really need for a combo. This card is just really, really good, and it has a really good stat line for its cost. And now we have Tram Heist, which is a 4-cost spell that get a copy of each card from your opponent played last turn. Basically, this is a 4-cost Plagiarize, which exists in Rogue currently. However, because this card is a spell that you can slam down on any of your turns whenever your opponent makes a big push turn, if you somehow survive, this card is a lot better in my opinion. The only downside about this card is you might not have enough space in your hand for all the cards that your opponent might play on a given turn, depending how much mana cheat and such they're played on the previous turn. But honestly, this is a pretty good card for Thief Priest and just the support the deck needed. Now let's get onto the final Priest card, which is going to be Injured Holli'dae. A 3-cost, 3-attack, 7 HP minion, Battle Cry. Deal 4 damage to this minion. Overheal. Deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. Now, I see one problem with this card. While the stat line is really good, and is probably something that Overheal Priest really did need access to, the problem is it does 4 damage to itself when it gets played, unless you can somehow cheat it out of your deck, such as the new Elise, which I don't think you would want to run in a Overheal Priest deck anyways. Generally speaking, because all of the stereotypical heals that Priest has access to heal for 3, such as the location, or heal for 2, this card is going to be incredibly difficult to actually pull off the overheal mechanic, at least on the same turn you slam it down, especially given the fact that the new heal support card in this set can't actually overheal. It's weird to me that they're printing this card now, just because they didn't support it anywhere else in this set. I think it has potential because the overheal deck is something that has a lot of potential, but until we see something that can heal 4 or 5 on multiple minions at one time, I don't think this card is going to see much play. Alright, those were all the cards revealed for Shaman, DK, and Priest. Let me know down below which one you're most looking forward to using. Honestly, Excavate DK looks like a deck that I would have a lot of fun with, and is honestly probably what I am most excited for. Overall, I'm usually historically a big Highlander fan, so I am also really excited for the new Shaman deck. Like always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, bye bye.